So this is module 7 of InfoPath's DBXL training. If you've worked extensively with InfoPath Designer and specifically browser forms, you might have noticed the following limitation. You come to the Data tab and User Roles is disabled. User roles, as InfoPath is telling us right here, can only be used in forms designed to be filled out using the InfoPath filler. So if you're using a browser form, you can't do this. You're out of luck. So how can we work around this limitation? One of the ways that we can work around this limitation is by looking at Active Directory. So let me just create a data connection here, and I want to approach this from the perspective of somebody who doesn't know yet how we're going to solve this, right? So we're going to look at Active Directory. I'm going to use an operation called this is taking a little bit. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to use an operation called getUserInfo, which is going to get the Active Directories of a username that I provide. We talked about this in a previous lab, so I'm just going to go through that fairly quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a username, and then I'm going to obtain this table of all the user's data, of all that user's data. I'm just going to add a button here to query. So this is a really simple form. The purpose of the form is just to execute the query. The reason I'm doing this is because not everyone has access to manage the Active Directory on the server, on the network, on the domain. So this just gives you a glimpse of what's available. So let's just go take a look at my profile. The form is going to query the LDAP and bring back all the information that's available for myself. And just looking through here, I have already planted this. I have planted a department, and the value of the department key is support. So let me see if I can query one of the test accounts. And here, the department, I have set it up as sales. So we're starting off from the assumption that your company is using some property, some key in Active Directory that allows you to distinguish between one user and the next. Perhaps it's not department, perhaps it's something else, but again, the concept remains the same. You know, if you wanted to make the distinction by zip code, for example, I think there's a zip code, postal code property here, or you could do it by state. So there are other options here, but I have set this up on purpose to check for to have this department that distinguishes the two accounts. So my account is support and the Oregano account is support, and I think I set up Anis, so whoever has Anis is a member of sales right now. So whoever's a member of whoever's using at the Anis account right now, you're going to be able to sort of follow along because you're added to the sales group. Okay, so this is just a test form just to show us what's out there, and we say, okay, so we can make the distinction by department. And if you don't have anything in your Active Directory, you could talk to your network administrator and see if something could get added. So that's and that's pretty easy. So let's close this form. This was just a test. What we want to modify is we want to modify our actual form that we've been working with. And you'll recall that we had added this form options data connection, which was merely a secondary secondary data source that has these two flags, let's say. We're going to add a third one. We're going to call it current user department. And the reason we're putting this here is because we don't care about storing this from one session to the next. We're going to recalculate this every time the form is open to know what the current user's department is. So once that is modified, I can reattach it here and just walk through the data connection wizard, and that gets updated. So now if I take a look at my task pane, I have that node right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the form load rules once again, and I'm going to add a new rule, and it's going to be called check current user department. And I already have a data connection called getMyInfo that executes on load. So I know that as soon as the form opens, I already have getMyInfo executing. GetMyInfo has already executed. So what I need is I need to set the field's value of this new node that we just added, current user department, and we're just going to go to getMyInfo, and just like we did in the Active Directory module, we select the value, but then we filter based on the key. And the key, as we saw in our little test form, was department. So this is going to bring in the current user's department into the node that we added to form options. That's pretty easy there. What are we going to do with this information? Well, there are a couple of things. I'm going to show you two options. There are more, of course. The first option I'm going to show you is switching to a different view. So I'm going to go here to page design, and I'm going to click on new view, and I'm going to call this sales. So basically I'm going to have a new view just for salespeople. And I'm not going to worry about adding too much information here since this is just an example. But the demonstration is going to show that for users that have the sales department in their Active Directory profile, we're going to send them to this view. So we go back to our form load rules, and we're going to add a new action, and the action is called switch views. And we're going to click add, switch views, and we're going to switch views to the sales view. So there's our action, I guess, but we need a condition, right? We don't want to switch to the sales view all the time. So adding the condition is pretty simple. We just select a field or group. We go to the form options. We get current user department is equal to sales. So if the current user department is sales, we switch them to the sales view. I have my rules sort of out of order here because you see that I'm checking the current user department after. So I need to put these in the correct order. I need to check the user department first, and then I can switch views. So when I execute this, it's not going to switch views because I'm not a member of the sales department. But this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to save the form, and I'm going to attach it to DBXL and save that. Okay. I'm going to go to the SharePoint site, and I'm going to change who I'm logged in as. So I'm going to try to sign in as Oregano so I can show this in action. Hopefully nobody's using Oregano. I apologize if I just kicked you out. So now I'm signed in as Oregano. I can go to my form library and open that form, and it took me to the sales view. So that's just one example of what we can accomplish with this, switching to a different view. And one thing you might notice is that there's an option here to switch me back to view 1, and that's undesirable. So let's deactivate that. The way to deactivate that is pretty simple. You just go to your forms, advanced form options, and we can deactivate these options. Let's just deactivate everything. The views option is specifically here, but I have just chosen to deactivate the entire thing just to make the browser view a little bit more clean, right? You're just going to see the HTML page, no ribbon. And I'm just reattaching that and resaving it in DBXL. So now when I open that form again, so I'm taking now to this a new view just for salespeople, and I don't have this ribbon to show me close, save, or change views. So you've locked down the salespeople. The salespeople can't see the main view at all. Okay, so that's one strategy, is to switch views, but we can all probably agree that switching a view is pretty drastic, right? Maybe you need the form to be a little bit more subtle in the way that it hides or displays data to certain users. So let me go back to the form load rules and disable this view switch so that I can explain a different option here. Let's pick a control. So let's say that let's pick a control. Let's say expense code. So let's say that we're going to disable expense code. Whoops. We're going to disable expense code for sales. So I'm going to say if the current user department is equal to sales, then I'm going to disable this control. So I want you to think about the two options I'm proposing here. One option is very drastic. You're taking the user to a completely different view. So you as the form designer need to be responsible for designing that new view, etc. The option I'm proposing in this case is you're disabling one control. So those are the two ends of one very long spectrum, right? You can switch a view entirely, hide a view entirely, or you can disable one very specific control. And in between those two options, there are a lot of other options, right? You could switch. You could disable 5 fields. You could disable a section. You could hide a section. So there are more options here. And just so you know, the formatting rules that you can add on an InfoPath form are not limited to just hiding a control or disabling a control. You can also add formatting. You can add highlighting. You can change the font color. You can make something bold or underlined. But what I'm proposing for the purposes of this demonstration is if it's a salesperson, then let's lock down the expense code. So we're going to add an onload rule here, and we'll say if the current user department is equal to sales, then we're going to set the expense code for them. Let's say the expense code is 1090, whatever. So now when I preview this form, I'm not a member of sales. Well, I am still signed in as a member of sales. So let me sign in as a different user. I'll save my form, I'll attach it to DAT. And now we'll go test. So I'm signed in as myself. When I open the form, I can type into the expense code anything I want. And then if I sign in as Oregano, I can open the form again, and I'll see that the expense code is 1090 and I can't type into it. I promise that I'm trying to type into this field and I cannot. And if somebody signed in as Anis, you can try it as well and you'll see that you can't type into that field. So what's the purpose of demonstrating this? The purpose is to show that there's a limitation in InfoPath browser forms where you cannot have user roles. And user roles, like it says here, define unique form behavior for different users or groups. So what we're proposing is, let's simulate that. Let's find a workaround for it using Active Directory. And we have shown two different ends of a spectrum. One end of the spectrum is controlling the visibility of one control in the form, and the other end of the spectrum is switching views entirely. So if we want to make this, if we wanted to, for example, tell the salespeople that they're not allowed to use this form, maybe there's a different form for sales, you are not allowed to use this form, and then you give them a button to close. So it can be extended to become a sort of security feature where you're preventing a certain group of people from certain group of users from making use of this form. Right? So there are many options and it depends on how you want to use it, but hopefully the module that we have just covered gives you some ideas on how to take advantage of Active Directory and simulate InfoPath user roles.